Hello and a warm welcome to another episode. My guest today is Lewin Keller, former employee at Google and now founder of CoachBot, a company fostering coaching with the help of AI. And our today's topic is the superpower of execution called accountability. And you will learn that with a system of accountability, you can boost the probability to reach your target by 95%. So without further ado, welcome, Lewin. Lewin Keller. Welcome, Lewin.
Thank you, Björn. The pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we got introduced by our mutual friend Max, and instantly we recognized or discovered that we are both coaches and that we have been in touch and discovered the, let's call it superpower of execution, accountability. So I'm super thrilled to have you in this very special episode today. But before we dive into the topic, let's share a little bit of your background and your professional journey, where accountability was a fundamental part.
Super. Thank you. After finishing my master in business administration, I started in consulting. I saw how accountability should not be played in a professional setting because it was full of freelancers and no one was accountable or responsible for anything. And it was not my style. So I went straight into an early stage startup where I was wearing multiple hats and I was super accountable for everything that I did, because if the job wasn't done, it was clearly assigned to me that this wasn't done. And then I grew into Google, where I was 6 years from SDR to a sales leader. And I got to know a culture of accountability where everyone was really highly accountable, and you could ask for help if you needed it. Everyone helped you to kind of bring the project forward or whatever was your task, and there was no blame game. So I was learning, wow, you can actually influence your company culture a lot in terms of accountability. And then also in my personal journey, I realized accountability is what brings me from having a great goal to actually achieving it. So I got so intrigued by the topic that I became a professional coach myself, as you said, and today actually started a business about the topic. So it's great to chat with you about this topic and hopefully enlighten our audience more on the topic.
All right, then let's dive into the topic. So just I think let's clarify accountability first, because I've heard accountability, so being accountable, holding someone accountable. Then we have we touched kind of also this kind of, I say what I'm doing and I do what I'm saying. It's part of accountability. So what I'm saying, there is a lot of buzz around accountability. So maybe we just clarified it, or we have different layers of accountability. Just put this as a starting point.
Yeah, my definition of accountability. And you can see in this word account and ability, and we know ability as our abilities, but it's also in responsibility. It's our ability to respond. Now, if we do the same game on accountability, our ability to account, okay, that's a bit more weird. But again, it's a lot about our responsibility for our actions, decisions, and the outcomes. So if I set myself a goal and it's a, let's say, valid goal because it's meaningful, I have my why, it's smart, it's specific, measurable, and all these things. And I want to reach it, then it's my accountability to be responsible for everything that brings me closer to the goal. And no matter if this is in personal, where I say, okay, this year I want to lose so much weight, or I want to gain this level of fitness, I'm responsible for my actions towards that goal. And obviously, we talked about accountability already in the version of oneself or one another. So for example, if you together set a goal, you're together accountable for that goal and holding yourself responsible for it. So in the example of gym, you can say, okay, we together, we go to the gym until we can do 10 push-ups or whatever. So, and in the business context, again, we have huge teams. Oftentimes, they're not all part of goal setting, and this is where it's getting interesting. So maybe we can talk about the responsibility in business later, because it's a little more complex.
All right. I love challenges. So I would like to jump straight ahead, because I see at least different layers or facets of accountability. So in a business context. So what I see is, and we talked about the hidden superpower of execution. So I see on a company level, and you described it, or you just had it was kind of an appetizer with the culture of Google, is that I see it on the culture and on the company level, kind of whether it's core value or working principle, or it's kind of some way that's the norm for every employee. So that's company level. Then you already touched kind of being holding someone accountable or being held accountable in a team, and then you have it on a individual level. Does it make sense, or would you kind of?
Yeah, I would say there is a personal accountability, that's, just you with your values, beliefs, goals, and so forth. Then there's the professional accountability, where you have, certain responsibilities towards your stakeholders, your business, your employees, and so forth. And there can be team accountability. This is a certain group within that organization. It can be, your smallest team, but it can also be your department and so forth. And then there is also something I think that we call societal accountability. So this is really, what are we responsible for as businesses, as members of this
All right.
this planet. But let's maybe not talk about this, but focus on the professional and the team accountability.
All right. When it comes to culture of execution, and at least you mentioned that as a kind of role model or a best practice example. So what was basically the result of a strong accountability component in Google's culture that was beneficial? So I'm intrigued to learn more about what were the results and what was perfect. Also some ingredients of your success back at Google, and how did accountability play into this?
So the Google culture is something that is super famous, right? Like, we all know about how they came together to eat like a family, super innovative. You can spend 20% of your time for side projects that are just about innovation. So we all know they're doing something special around their culture. And I would describe it now very high level as they're designing their culture actively with measures, with certain rules that are either written, can be some kind of playbook, but it can also be rules that are not so much written into the values, into the goals whatsoever. But people understand it when they onboard in the company, when they talk to their colleagues and so forth. And just to see the other side, and then we can compare it a little bit. In a startup, accountability is naturally very high, as I experienced it, especially when it's a very early stage startup, because there's so little people. They are wearing multiple hats at times, and you can, as I said in the beginning, clearly, let's say, distribute the work to a certain people and a person, and then also realize when the work has not been done. But while the team grows, especially if you go out of this tribe structure, which is usually like 150 people is a good number, then you get to a point where accountability becomes less obvious. It also comes to a point where silos form, communication breaks down a little bit. And if someone is not doing the job, then people notice this. And, if you get through with it, they maybe challenge their own thinking about, why should I work late to make that project happen? And when you come into a huge company like Google, like when I joined them, it was about 90,000 or 80,000 people already, huge globally. You're coming into your small tribe, your small team and so forth, and you're looking into, how is my manager, behaving? How are my colleagues behaving? And how is the overall organization behaving? And I feel Google did an amazing job, from the onboarding, where we had a senior director telling us about, what's Google, what's culture for him. We asked him, hey, what are the things that you recommend us to do? And there were so simple tips as, for example, like, hey, stay hydrated, get enough sleep, and go work out and stay enough in the sun. And you're like, what? This is really what do you mean with like being a hyper performing employee? And because it's the basics. But all of this created a sense of responsibility and accountability, because this leader knew if he doesn't take care of the basics, then he cannot perform. And this was just an example to make you understand, like, that Google really cares about you as an employee. They also care about your success, and they support you with it. So they buddy you internally with mentors. There was a thing called Googler to Googlers, G2G, where you can connect to someone who maybe has skills or expertise in a certain area, and this person will help you with mentorship or with coaching you or whatsoever. So it's very interesting when you start your accountability journey and you have an idea of something. The accountability is fairly low, but you can bring your accountability attainment, the probability that you will reach it, higher and higher of certain steps. And one very important step in this, let's say, the
hierarchy,
this graph or hierarchy, exactly, is talking to someone else about your goal. Because the moment you bring in an external person into the quotation, you're bringing actually your probability up to 65%, which is quite high. There's only one more measure above that can get you even higher or even closer to your goal. So Google understood all these things, because I think they're working with research institutions, but they did this very early. Today it's kind of normal that you partner up with Harvard and anyone and find out how can you make your workplace more effective and efficient. But so they brought in these measures of like making sure the rules are understood, no matter if they're written out or not. So people could agree on a set of standards, and the standard could be like, hey, we're not working until midnight because it's unhealthy, because we need our 8 hours of sleep, and we should be, in a good situation, like in a good physical state when we come to work in the morning and so forth. So there was so many great rules that people respected and took care of, that they had this agreement on. And then on top, there were these things like an accountability buddy that helped you, this kind of no blame game culture where you could always ask for help. And then in the end, you owned your successes and your failures. And yeah, that made it a lot of fun to work there.
Great insights, and I really love it. I just, it's not directly related to accountability, but I have to touch this topic because I'm a firm believer that companies are not family. And you mentioned that the Google family. So for me, it's a sports team or a team, but that was too tempting. So just you're smiling. So is it a family or was it a high performance or what is it? Was it more like a sports team?
I think it was a family. It was actually family. Like, I realized that when I joined Google, I left my early stage startup job that was amazing because they wanted to retain me, offered me the same consultant salary that I would have got if I would have stayed in the consultancy before. And they did everything I needed to have in that moment, and they offered me amazing growth because of the early stage. But then Google came along, and I was like, okay, I cannot say no. So I go there for 1 year. Out of this 1 year, it became 6 years, several promotions from SDR to kind of a middle layer manager. There was so much business trips and personal development budgets. I went to India, trained as a yoga teacher. They paid for it. It was like a mini sabbatical. I had so much coaching on the job, off the job, supported by Google. They actually fund all your personal projects, hobbies, where you learn a language, where you get a new skill. It was up to 25%, I remember it. So it was so much, and we came together. We played Xbox, we played board games, we read books, we went on holidays. It was a family. Now, if you ask me if this was healthy, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't have a clear answer, but I believe strongly in what you say. We should act as a sports team. We have a coach that whose job is to constantly challenge ourselves to improve the dynamics, maybe improve the rules, make hard decisions if needed. But we're all coming together for a bigger purpose, a unifying goal. And in businesses, it's clear you want to be more successful, whatever that means. And I don't know actually if the family, let's say, this feeling of family is so helpful. But maybe we can take some parts of it and combine it with the sports metaphor to make it really successful.
Yeah. So the biggest issue I have with family, and I had the luxury to work in cultures where it almost felt like our family. It felt nice, and I was surrounded by amazing people who actually care. But nevertheless, the issue with family I have is, at least in my definition of family, you are, whatever you are doing, whatever kind of the results are you are producing, you are family for life. But this is not healthy and it's not real. So this is is it hypothetical? How do you say it? So basically, it's to make a provocative statement. It's a lie.
It's a lie.
To basically build up, and I'm coming back to early stage startups. It's a tool. It's a narrative to get people into a bigger picture and to buy into a vision. But at the very end, when it comes to hard times, like we have to think about layoff, we have to think about cutting costs. At the very end, no one is safe in that kind of startup or company environment. And that's the biggest conflict I have with family. Even I totally agree with you on there are some criteria.
Agreed. And this is exactly what happened to many of the people in Google that did not leave like I did about 4 or 5 years ago, but they're still on the team, and they are now undergoing through rounds of layoffs over and over again. And their picture of, wait, you told me we're family, suddenly got shattered, right? And it was a hard shock. And a lot of those employees deal with mental stress and trauma at times as well, because suddenly their world doesn't make any more sense as kind of the employer was saying that before. And this is the problem. Companies change. OpenAI was once a research organization devoted to nonprofit, and now they have a totally different interest. I think Google was just in the news last week because they took off their website that they're not using AI for weapons, and now this is kind of no longer on the website. So if you identify with those values, and this is the reason why you work for a certain organization, and then this changes everything in your value and belief system, and suddenly things are mixed up, and you don't know, hey, do I still want to do that night shift until 3 a.m. for that project because I so strongly believed into those values? And I've seen this in Google all the time, since the value match was so high for so many people, and they identified with the employer in a way that it was almost like a sect. It's bad to say, but I was like this. I was a groupie, I had Google swag all over. My life was all Google. My friends were like, hey, is there anything else than Google for you? Not much. Because there was this identification with family. We were like a very strong tribe, despite the size of 100K people around the globe. So yeah, let's treat this with caution. And I love the sports metaphor. And I think we can learn a lot from performance sports. And again, if we now think about sports, we talk about the coach. And this is funny for me because oftentimes people come to me. I'm a professional coach. I have a business, an AI business in coaching. I have a platform for users to kind of, get help on setting goals, defining actions to reach them, and then track their progress. And some people come to me and say, wait, is this about sports? I didn't really catch that coach phrase, because in the American understanding, a coach is a sports coach. And then I need to kind of explain a little bit what we're trying to do here and so forth. But I love the sports analogy because they use a lot of tools and techniques to make sure that everyone understands exactly what is the problem or the goal and how do we get there. And they have super strong feedback loops. They have, they optimize everywhere. They use all the tools that they can get from ice baths and, physical massages and whatsoever. They're not stopping anywhere just to make sure they improve the accountability. So in that moment where you are, let's say, a soccer player in front of the goal, you have all the tools and resources you need to convert that. And I think, this is so exciting about us in early stage, me as a founder, but also as a coach working with other founders and people working in early stage, and you as a consultant, I think working with 100, you've worked with
I'm not a
150 early
consultant,
stage.
but we come to this.
Sorry, advisor. Yeah, you're right. It's a good one. As an advisor and coach, you also say, hey, I have my methodologies, my experience, but I saw on your website, you are also an accountability buddy for those founders, for those people who hire you. And this is such an important part of getting the work done. This person that takes over kicking you in the ass kind of constantly. So this accountability part in the end makes the difference of people who are just talking about their goals or doing something versus doing the right things over and over again and having those accountability checks. And maybe to add some data to it, there was a recent study and they found out people who have a system of accountability. So, this could be a third-party person, this could be written down, this could be regular check-ins and so forth. They reach their goals with a 95% attainment. This is probability, of course, but this is amazing. So if you think about that pyramid, 0% when you don't have a goal, and then 10% when you just think about it, 25% if you consciously think about it and decide you want to do it. I want to go to the gym. But then if you write it down and you put it on your wall, you can bring up the probability to 50%. And as I said earlier, the moment you bring in a buddy, like, hey, let's go to the gym together, 65%. But only if you bring in a system of accountability, you have an ongoing, success probability of 95%. And that makes a huge difference. And I feel most of us can relate to this because we all set ourselves a New Year's resolution or a personal goal. And after a couple of weeks, we forgot about it or we put it aside or found a new goal because we didn't have a check-in system, and this is very important.
Ein kurzer Werbeblock in eigener Sache. Mein neues Go-to-Market-Buch ist endlich im Druck und kann ab sofort vorbestellt werden. Darin teile ich meine langjährige operative Erfahrung und tiefgehende Einblicke aus über 100 B2B-Software-Startups und Scale-Ups. Du bekommst praxisnahe Beispiele und konkrete Anwendungen aus meiner täglichen Arbeit mit Early-Stage-Startups und meinen Investments als Business Angel. Von der Segmentierung deiner Zielkunden bis zur Steigerung der Sales Velocity. Mein eigens entwickeltes Go-to-Market Flywheel bietet dir einen umfassenden Leitfaden für sich selbst beschleunigendes Wachstum. Den Link findest du in den Shownotes. Werbung, Ende. Und nun zurück zur Folge.
Yeah. No, and it totally resonates with me. So it wasn't planned, to be fair, but it is one of the key learnings I gathered over the last 2 to 3 years. So one thing I focused very, very much on processes and structure when it comes to sales and go-to-market. But at the very end, and that's why now it's these kind of weekly check-ins, it's a mix between status update and accountability is kind of a prerequisite for all of my clients. So to really have this kind of accountability, this check-in to align, are we still heading in the right direction? What kind of friction did occur? Is there any kind of lack of skills? So is there anything blocking the way to reach our target, which has to be agreed by everyone, but then also to see how can we speed up what needs to change and or to reduce friction, because either you push or you reduce the friction to actually get to this either target or milestone. And just picking up when you said you've been working in early stage startups and you have some work you're doing in early stage startup, I would challenge that a lot of people are accountable. Because what I see, or maybe to shed a little bit more light on it. So there are a lot of people super, super smart, super motivated. They are working very, very hard on to basically to buy in this kind of vision and mission. And on the other hand, I see a lot of unclarity where to focus. So where putting the efforts into. So you said earlier that you see a lot of accountability in early stage startups, and I would like to challenge you on this, because what I see is a lot of dedication, motivation, people working hard, but are they fully accountable in terms of, are they doing everything which is needed or should be done in reaching their targets? And I would circle back because I see a lot of unclarity, a lot of misalignment, which is basically sabotaging accountability.
Yeah, if you want me to answer, I mean, you're the expert for sure. So, there is, I think, different factors that we need to take into account, right? Especially in Google, I've worked with so many early stage startups because we help them as part of the Google Cloud Startup Program, to gain access to workspace and the Google Cloud instances and so forth. So, oftentimes these were teams between 3 and 10 people, and what I saw is when you have a very clear set of role and responsibilities within those teams, it's obvious of who is responsible for what. The problem starts when those organizations grow and these roles responsibilities become a bit more unclear. So the typical growing pains. So I felt oftentimes it was more difficult or inefficient to work with a team of 10, where maybe you had 3 people on the email versus just one person, right? Because it was clear who does the job. And it's like another factor on top was then if the management or the leadership wasn't establishing a culture of good feedback loops on top, there was a lack of empowerment around the culture in the organization. And sometimes there were leadership blind spots on top. So if they didn't answer you, why would you? If my CEO doesn't care about this project, maybe I don't want because I'm trying to please my CEO and so forth. So I think there are so many factors, and I hope that you already have a system in place that you can help me and others to understand how you can check for that. But I think when you go into a company, you cannot just say, oh, this doesn't work because there is no individual accountability of a person or a team. It also, you cannot per se say, okay, it's a culture problem. So you really need to understand what are the underlying problems and issues that obviously can be fixed, because most times I saw in early stage companies very motivated people, very talented people, but yeah, the moment it grew and we had some of those issues, it didn't work out perfectly.
Yep. And happy to share 2 of my favorite tools, because one thing is, and I would say I got milder over time. So I always check is it clear and understood what or leaders expect from their ICs or their employees. So it all starts with this awareness. Is it clear? My set of expectation, is it clear? The second component is, so this is kind of, do they know? The second component is, are they capable of doing this? You mentioned roles and responsibilities. Yeah, it's great to have this role, but do they have the skills and the competencies to actually fulfill that role? The third component, and this is an interesting one, do they actually want to do things and put them into are they willing to execute? So a lot of people are just saying, but they are not executing, or they are not consistently executing. And the fourth component, and this is really interesting because I'm working with a lot of founders who are transitioning to a proper organization, is, do I actually trust people and allow that they are getting things on the ground? And this is kind of having this permission and being able that they're actually doing stuff depending on or accordingly to their role and responsibilities. Or do I still have this kind of muscle as a founder to just jump in and out, do stuff better or faster or whatever? So having these 4 components really help to assess more in much deeper level from different angles. So do they have a proper chance to being held accountable? And then the other thing in terms of mindset, I'm a huge fan of dripping deeper and not just focusing on company values, but working with either working or operational principles, even working with a team manifesto or something comparable, really explicitly written down and agreed on together. So this is not a one-way street. So that is basically the translation of these are the shared rules and norms, like you described it at Google. So is accountability a part of this? And how does it translate into desired behavior and to be improved behavior? Let's put it that way.
Yeah. First of all, that sounds like a great model, especially when you also talked about, is the person empowered and so forth. Obviously, this is where already the work starts. Has the founder hired the right people or HR and so forth? But then, are they empowered to do the job? Do they get the resources they need? Do they have the trust? And this reminded me so much of Google, where I felt like, wow, they trust me to do the job, because I was able in my 20% projects to speak some of their best paid engineers, and we had, really meaningful engagement whereby I was, let's say, a seller. Yeah. Not on that level than maybe this top engineer. So to come back to early stage, I think, and I mentioned it earlier a little bit, goal setting is so important that people can buy into those goals and commitments, because a goal is nothing else eventually as a commitment, and then a commitment. And if you don't write it down, is it really committed? If you say, oh, I'm committing to not drink any alcohol in January, if you haven't talked to anyone about it, or you haven't written it down, and then the next day you're going out with people after work for drinks, and it's just it just happened, and then everyone is getting drinks and someone brings around, and you're like, oh, thank you, I'll have that one, because you're not committed. And it's the same in a team. If you have a good meeting and a brainstorm, and then you're talking about, oh, this would be a great idea, and oh yeah, I like that, maybe I'll check on that, but you haven't really followed up with it, likely you're going to deprioritize it. So I think making those commitments visible is one super important first step. And what you just mentioned was the manifesto. It reminded me that I'm working with a partner at the minute in my startup, and they created a manifesto, which is, it's a really cool document underlining their purpose, their mission, their values, their beliefs, how they want to do it. And I'm meeting them next week to sign it physically. When do we still sign something physically? But it's a cool act, and I'm really excited about it, because I will be committed to that manifesto. I have every part of it in my head now, and it's totally different than if you maybe join a company. Let's say you're switching from one company to the next one. Maybe you even got laid off. You had a bit of a bad experience, and you join a new company, and yeah, you maybe get in whatever the HR tool 20, 30 pages of the company culture or the code of conduct, and you're like, yeah, approved, have read it. And you are not really aware of what are their structures, their operational guidelines that you kind of described earlier. So it's very difficult, because then you start to learn from your peers. And if maybe your team is in a bad state because, let's say, the leader or the manager is on paternity leave, and there's someone standing up and totally overwhelmed, and it's chaotic, and you're like, oh, this is how we work here, okay, then I work as well a little bit like this, and boom, suddenly you have a problem. And this can, similar to a virus, spread, yeah, because if you see this person is not working well and this person is not working well, why would I work hard, and so forth. So it's very important to have a model of accountability, and usually those models start at the top. So your leaders must set the tone. This is very important, because it's usually the biggest impact on an organization. And if you then follow something, like you said, a structured set of check-ins, weekly we meet on this, monthly we meet on this, quarterly we meet on our OKRs, and we check if they're still valid or if they need to do tweaks. And then maybe you use AI, because AI is pretty cool these days to have these accountability check-ins. Yeah. Wow, then you're set up for success. And then I think you make accountability a cultural thing.
Yeah, I really love it. So I'm very pleased with this episode. So just to sum it up, because like you're saying, so we're coming again back to at least 2 level, 3 levels. So it starts like all the major or most important things, they start on top. So really creating this culture of execution or accountability, how you frame it, and then shared with the team, because we talked a lot about being accountable, but also being accountable. And then really on a personal level, with all the tips and tricks. And you already mentioned, and this is kind of my key learning, I wasn't aware that you can boost the probability of actually getting things done by 95%. I knew already that it's massive, being accountable and really write it down, make it explicit, share it with others. But 95 is very impressive, and I'm super thrilled to see your new adventure, your new company getting into play. So for the ones who are interested, I will link it to the show notes. But before we do so, or finish for today, I am very happy to ask you the last question, either to be answered on a personal or a business level. So what are you learning as of now, what you do not master yet fully?
Oh my God, where to start? Let me think. In business, in personal as well, tons of things. But in business, having been in corporate environments or even in scaling environments where there was funding, private equity or through the revenues or whatsoever, it was a lot about scaling, because I came in when product market fit was already done and we had our ICP and we could scale. Yeah, at times we changed the ICP or we entered a new segment, moved up the market or whatever. But I was always about scaling. So my last 10 years were basically like, okay, who do we need to hire? Let's hire this person, make sure they're thriving, and then let's coach them to become a leader and hire more people. And this is a little bit the mentality that I brought in last year when I started my early stage mission. And I soon ended up with quite a good burn rate. It was still decent for what I had, because those people were freelancers with, fair prices. But I tried to get the best people in each of the areas, product, technology, marketing around me. And I already had a marketing team of 2 before I even had product marketing fit. And, just to run some organic marketing and some experiments and your social media, you don't need a CMO and kind of an associate. So yeah, for me, it's about as an early stage founder to, let's say, let go of the need for scaling and the kind of let's jump ahead, to sit with where I am right now and look at the data and look at my profiles of customers, their problems, and really understand deeply what they care about, what they need, build for that, test for it. Only then, when everything is done, the scaling will likely happen naturally. I'm sure there, you can optimize that then later on, but this is the journey that I'm on.
Yeah, and super value advice. So been there myself. So you think you need much more power and people, and at the very end, it all takes much, much longer. And sometimes, something in that regard, 20% will help. And so it's fascinating to follow your journey. It was great having you on the show, and I wish you all the best of luck and success. And either way, we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Björn.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.